I'd like to introduce our guests are going to speak together as they wrote this book together, The Courage to Face COVID-19. And I want to let you just a little preface. The book is available out there, and if there's not enough books for everybody, they have some flyers so that you can get a code and get a good deal on that. So check that out at the table. Unfortunately, Dr. McCullough has to leave immediately afterwards, and I know that some of you are going to try to tackle him at the door. We have security. It's not going to happen, just so that you know. And his co-author, John Leake, studied history and philosophy with Sir Roger Scruton at Boston University, and then he went to Vienna, Austria on a graduate school scholarship and ended up living in the city for over a decade, working as a freelance writer and translator. His first book, Entering Hades, The Double, was a New York Times Sunday Book Review, Editor's Choice, a Men's Vogue Best Book of 2007. You might want to get that. And the inspiration of Infernal Comedy with John Malkovich. He was watching a video of Dr. McCullough testifying before a Senate hearing and said, I think this is the voice to lead the way in this season. So please welcome author John Leake.
I thank you guys for having us here. What a warm welcome. I didn't realize we have developed some prejudices in Texas against California, and this is really dispelling them. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Peter McCullough brings truth to the world and fights battles against censorship, just got put back on Twitter, praise the Lord, and reprisal. He is an internist, cardiologist, epidemiologist, and the chief scientific officer of the Wellness Company. Since the outset of the pandemic, Dr. McCullough has dozens of peer-reviewed publications on the infection and has commented extensively on the medical response to COVID-19 crisis. Dr. McCullough is one of the most published cardiologists ever in the United States of America. Please welcome our friend and hero.
Wow. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thanks to each and every one of you for attending tonight. I feel here in Thousand Oaks, there's a scientific revolution going on, really. It's a scientific reawakening. And after 3 years of the public being stonewalled by our public health agencies, by medical schools, and reconciled their views of what they perceive is going on with some views of other people. And that's fair because we've been through a lot in the last 3 years. What I want to do as we open up here is I want to show a quick video. So if you can switch to the book trailer.
Deadly
Here it
virus
is.
emanating from Wuhan, China is sweeping across the globe.
Fear has gripped countries
Something
around the
is
world.
off.
The disease caused by the novel coronavirus has been titled COVID-19.
What we're being told doesn't add
so
up.
important in this crisis that we in, that people put
Congress
aside
passes a multi-billion-dollar bill that will bring
There is no cure, no way to treat this illness. All we can do is wait for a vaccine.
All we can do is wait for a vaccine.
There must be a doctor out there who's questioning this.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm the Vice Chairman of Internal Medicine. The only chance to reduce the risks of hospitalization is early home treatment. We can beat this pandemic.
Patients actually think the virus is untreatable. There's such a focus on the vaccine. Where's the focus on people sick right now?
the pressure to suppress any hope of treatment is extraordinary.
Why the single-minded focus on the vaccine? What is that? What is that about?
That's really going to be the goal of investigative reporters to figure this out.
Unprecedented lockdowns, devastating economic damage, huge violations of personal freedom, families separated from their loved ones, all in the name of a medical emergency.
Things won't go back to truly normal until we have a vaccine that we've gotten out to the entire world.
The hope we have of protecting our communities is to get a needle in every arm.
They call this a business opportunity. We are witnessing the greatest organized crime in history, to the tune of trillions of dollars.
The biopharmaceutical complex is using censorship, propaganda, and manipulation to keep people living in fear. But what we need now is courage.
Wow. John Leake is hot. John, tell us about the book and your concept of it and how it came together.
The book is the true story of a massive organized crime. I think that's the easiest way. It's very complicated. A lot of this is under the cloak of, as Pastor Rick pointed out in that C.S. Lewis quote, a lot of this is being cloaked in a tyranny of people who are doing what they claim is good for us, so we don't see it. We think of organized crime as like the Mario Capuzzo novel, The Godfather, the famous film with Marlon Brando, and why is the Al Pacino? We think of it as a sort of Sicilian mafia story. That's organized crime. That's our concept of it in America. But in fact, organized crime is something that can affect any institution, any state, any polity. And I think if we start with the proposition that what we're seeing, and I think this came through, I hope it came through in the trailer, when SARS-CoV-2 arrived, it activated a business plan. There had been years of pandemic planning by what we call the biopharmaceutical complex. The other thing that I noted in Pastor Rick's introduction, in his remarks, 1961 was a very interesting year. Ronald Reagan made these observations about medicine becoming a gateway of centralized state power imposing tyranny. In that same year, as President Eisenhower was leaving office, he gave a farewell address in which he warned of the rise of what he called the military-industrial complex. What we're seeing, by way of a kind of overarching concept that I think is useful to think about as you try to interpret this, it's a combination of something like a military-industrial complex, we call it the biopharmaceutical complex, with a great deal of advanced planning from which emerged a business plan. You saw Mr. Gates, one of the greatest monopolists in American history since John D. Rockefeller. He had a hand in this. And so what we see is a strategy with the arrival of SARS-CoV-2 to induce so much fear within the context of emergency powers being invoked. Again, Pastor Rick, I was very impressed. This harkens back to the 1993 Reichstag fire in Germany. Under the cloak of a public emergency, we have this massive organized crime that has been perpetrated. So that's what I would start with as you think about this story.
And it tells the story from my viewpoint and the viewpoints of other doctors who were simply trying to relieve the symptoms of the illness, and by that mechanism, reduce the chances of hospitalization and death. And why certain doctors saw this immediately as an opportunity to step forward and help patients, and while others retreated. And when I went on Tucker Carlson, I told him, I said, this was like a medical Super Bowl. That some doctors went on the field and took this on. They had the courage to face this illness. Many were on the sidelines, and then sadly, many are up in the stands. They didn't want to get anywhere near COVID-19. So the book lays it out in an organized way. This is a mind-blowing reality. It's not a medical book. And I want to acknowledge philanthropist Charlotte Hughes, who bought the books for free of charge for you today. So if there are some books still in the back, if you want to go out quietly during this presentation to pick up your copy. I don't think there's enough for everybody, but she was wonderful to buy them. And when we run out, there's some QR codes to go ahead and pick up a copy. But this book has been considered like a red pill, if you will, where people read it, and because it's fun to read, it's big print, it can be read in a couple hours, you can read it on a plane flight, that you get an understanding that, wait a minute, this is a treatable illness. What we were being told by our government agencies was actually a false narrative. It was put out there, and it was very intentional. There was the suppression of treatment to promote public fear, suffering, hospitalization, and death. The only way that hospitalization and death could be avoided would be to treat the problem early. That was the only method. And when our government said no methods of early treatment, none, and held that line, despite all the efforts that we took, we knew something was wrong. John and I lived close. He was living in Vienna at the time and then came back to Dallas to help out his mom. His mom lives near me in Dallas. And it just turns out that we were able to collaborate. It takes about a year to write a book. That video where you saw me talking into the camera, I had COVID at that time. I had an early version of COVID, and I had pulmonary involvement. So you could see kind of the strain of me getting the words out. It was a beautiful day in Dallas, and I was trying to see if I could run. That was about the treatment day 8 and my illness, treatment day 6, illness day 8. And I had the pulmonary involvement, so I couldn't run to the capacity that I normally would, but I was testing it. I was away from people and responsible. So I had it firsthand. I took risks. I simply was not going to let my patients die. And the doctors, the doctors that refused to answer the phone calls, and the doctors who literally told patients, no, there's no treatment, and sent them home and let them intentionally suffer to the point where they could breathe no more and come into the hospital and see their loved ones never again and perish in the hospital. There will be a day of reckoning for these people, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. So I'll let John conclude, and just can you define for us what this biopharmaceutical complex is, who are they, and what crimes were committed?
I think the easiest way to understand the biopharmaceutical complex, it really develops and culminates after the SARS, the first SARS emanated from China in 2003. There had long been perceptions that the virulent influenza, we had one in 1958, 1957 we had another one in 1968. There had long been talk that we might get another really virulent influenza like we had in 1918. But in 2003, with the first SARS that came out of China, you suddenly have a very intense, rapid interest in, okay, now we're going to really start planning on a catastrophic viral illness, probably emanating from China again. And we see this, what we call this biopharmaceutical complex, really taking shape after 2003. A leader in the development of this on the business side of it, with extreme financing and business savvy, was the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation. Interestingly enough, after which the Gates Foundation was modeled, the Wellcome Trust. And they form these alliances with state treasuries all over the world, all over Europe and the United States. And I think this is a point that's often overlooked. A lot of people in this room have probably noticed that I would say over the last 15 years there has been a catastrophic loss of fiscal discipline. The governments of the world now seem to feel like they can just create endless amounts of money. So I think there is an unholy alliance between unconstrained creation of money and this complex of these international foundations and their alliances with major pharmaceutical companies. The perception was, if an emergency comes, per the Cures Act of 2005, the Department of Health and Human Services can declare an emergency. And with the declaration of this emergency, there is this vast array of what they call pandemic countermeasures, all of which is done as an emergency authorization, issues of liability, product control, transparency, all of these very important institutional safeguards for how our public institutions and our businesses operate are just thrown out the window because it's an emergency. So we see this unholy alliance, and it's very, very morally corrosive, of unlimited money supply and politicians who are willing to disperse, and we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars, to their friends within this complex. And we citizens, Pastor Rick, the ladies at PERC, we're left sort of cobbling together a small institutional, trying to push back against this, trying to defend our U.S. Constitution against what really is a massive, overarching, tyrannical state and its, I would say, corporate partners binding together. And to me, as a political historian, this really reminds me of early theories that emerged from Italy in the 20s, the doctrine of fascism, an alliance of the state with corporate interests binding together. People with a medical bent recognize the word fascia, that which binds together, binding the state and corporate interests together. And the net effect of this is leaving the citizenry somewhat helpless. So I think that these are the overarching themes. Our book has a lot of character development. It is a narrative-driven story, a character-driven story. Obviously, Dr. McCullough is a key figure in it. I think that if you do pick up a copy of it, you will find it to be a page-turner. That was our intention, and I think our 900 five-star reviews on Amazon are confirming that. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Thank you. That's terrific. So these crimes that were elucidated, fraud and mass negligent homicide, and I've testified now multiple times in the U.S. Senate and state senates, because there was a learning curve on how we develop treatments for COVID-19. There's a community standard of care that's always developed by doctors in the field taking care of patients. They're not developed by medical boards or the CDC, NIH, or FDA. They're by treating doctors. That about 2/3 of those who lost their lives and those who were hospitalized could have been saved with an all-out effort and endorsement of early treatment by former President Trump and now President Biden and the task force. It never happened, either one. 2 administrations failed us. They did. I want to see a show of hands. How many of you here who watched this trailer, how many of you think there should be a movie? Just about every, it was about 99 to 1 vote on the internet that, yeah, it should be a movie. This needs to be exposed. So we're going to consider it for sure. And afterwards, give me an idea of who should play me. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Now, I want to let you know, this presentation that Pastor Rick and Amy have put together, there's 2 themes. One theme is what's going on in the minds of people, this infectious spread of a groupthink that is tending in every way to spread authoritarianism, that is, to apply control over someone else. And this was creeping in the years leading up to this in the world of vaccines, where it became more and more onerous and strict, and then ultimately impossible to even get any exemptions from taking vaccines. There's no vaccine nor any medicine that is so sufficiently safe and effective that everybody has to take it. It's impossible. It's impossible. So it was creeping up, but I want to let you know that DARPA, which is our research division of the Department of Defense, in 2012 started the Adept Protect program, the Pandemic Prevention Platform, P3 program. Look what it says. We will use a new category of preventive measures based on DNA or RNA, and that we will be able to develop vaccines within 60 days and end pandemics. Messenger RNA didn't come from Pfizer or Moderna. It didn't come right from Operation Warp Speed. When President Trump came out there and said, "Oh, this is going to be Operation Warp Speed, and we're going to get these done in a few months," he should have said, "Listen, we've been working on this since 2012. We've been working on this." I've heard BARDA consultants and contractors brag that they had billions of dollars flow to their clients in this program. I may have been one of the few public figures, probably Dr. Mikovits being another. Before these came out, I published in The Hill this paper that said, "I'm recognizing this as a gamble. This is installing genetic code in the human body to produce a foreign protein. It's going to wreak havoc in the human body, and there's never been a shot in the arm that's ever stopped an infection in the nose. It's never happened. This was a gamble for all time, and I put it down. By invitation, I was a regular contributor in The Hill in the first year of the pandemic. The ball of the virus is called the nucleocapsid. The red buds on top is the spike protein. All the lethality and the infectivity of the virus is in the spike protein. It was specifically genetically engineered. On the bottom of the slide are 2 papers of many from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Harvard, and a Swiss institute. First author is Menachery. Senior author is Ralph Barrick. The 2 principal ones, Nature Communications and the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, 2 journals. The titles of the papers are The Emergence of SARS-CoV-2 in Human Populations, published in 2015. They thank the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We thank them for letting the United States use their lab to do this gain-of-function research. It's right there in the papers. It's in the peer-reviewed literature. This is not a subject of controversy. SARS-CoV-2 is a U.S. biological threat development program, just like smallpox and monkeypox is, and aspergillus is, and anthrax. We have government programs to develop a threat and then develop an answer, vaccines and monoclonal antibodies, which was done in these papers. But we should have leveled. Our president should have leveled with us and said, listen, we were working on this. We were doing the work in Wuhan, China. Something went wrong and it got out. But America should have gotten an honest story, and from the very beginning, it didn't. The vaccines in brief, the major ones, Pfizer, Moderna, and now Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, install genetic code for this spike protein, which itself is dangerous and lethal to the human body. It's produced for an uncontrolled duration of time and an uncontrolled quantity. And by the grace of God, 85% of people who take these are okay. They take them and they're okay. 15%, according to a survey by Zogby and company, are now damaged or injured by these vaccines. 15%. In May of 2021, I was part of a 57-author paper. I was the second author on this paper that we sent to every single government, and we said, we have concerns about these vaccines. I won't read all the concerns, but there are no safety measures in place to make these safer and to protect the population if there's side effects. None whatsoever. The FDA has still to this day never commissioned a safety review of these vaccines. There's never been an independent data safety monitoring board. There's never been any consideration that these should be taken off the market for not being safe enough. Well, I can tell you in the last week, I just testified in the U.S. Senate, and I co-moderated the session. Senator Ron Johnson was there, Senator Roger Marshall from Kansas, and I gave the conclusion. I gave the conclusion for the country and the world, and the conclusion is pull these off the market. Okay, pull them off the market. Now, in the United Kingdom, my counterpart is Dr. Asim Malhotra. Isn't it interesting that cardiologists now, 3 years into it, I am a virologist. I am an infectious disease doctor. I have as much training now on the job as anyone. Asim Malhotra in the UK, whose fathers died after the vaccine, has come out and recently featured a presentation by Conservative Member of Parliament Andrew Bridgen, who now is calling in the British Parliament for all the vaccines to be pulled off the market. Just like Christine Anderson in Germany, in the European Parliament, is calling for them to be all removed off the market. Okay, Prashant Bhushan, who's a very lead attorney in India, who's been in the Supreme Court of India, is calling for them to be all pulled off the Indian market. It's worldwide. Our HHS, Health and Human Services, and the White House, early in 2021, had a program called the COVID Community Corps. $13 billion without any accounting oversight flowed into 276 agencies. It included the American College of Physicians, American College of Pediatrics, American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, the NFL, Hollywood, Black and Hispanic organizations, churches. This was the biggest government bribe in history. And people wonder, why does my obstetrician, promote the vaccines? Because his college was bribed with this massive amount of money. This is absolutely stunning what happened. Stunning. And it's all in the open. Everything I'm showing you has a URL, and it's on the internet. People have said, wait a minute. Lloyd Austin, the Department of Defense, claims the vaccines have saved the military. Let's look at what the consent form says for the COVID-19 vaccines under benefits. The smallest section of the entire consent form, benefits. It says the COVID-19 vaccine have been shown to prevent COVID-19, past tense. It's true, prior randomized trials of the earlier strains, they reduced the binary incidence of COVID-19. No reductions in hospitalization and death. Our CDC has come out and told us it doesn't stop transmission. It doesn't reduce severity. And now, under the current strains, it doesn't do anything. Nothing. Nothing. Completely ineffective. Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long testified under oath, U.S. Senate, 7 days ago. More military personnel have died due to the vaccine than have died due to COVID. In the military, they have perfect accounting of what's happened. It's all in the Senate record. We were in the Russell building. We were in the Kennedy caucus room for the second time. And everything is in the record. It's in the Senate record. It's going to be in the National Archives. And we want to make it clear to America. We invited Anthony Fauci, Rochelle Walensky, Ashish Jha, Surgeon General Murthy. They had chairs for them there. They've been invited every single time. They haven't shown up to get opinions of experts throughout the country. World Council for Health which represents 70 organizations worldwide. June 11th, 2022, pharmacovigilance report looking at all the safety databases concludes the vaccines are not safe for human use. Pull them off the market. You have opinion after opinion, report after report. They are not safe, and yet our government is advertising on TV, take a vaccine, it's safe and effective. Well, Ron DeSantis in Florida has had enough. Today Ron DeSantis announced a grand jury, and I was on TV about 6 times today, and they said, well, what is DeSantis going to go after? I said, how about false advertising? There's no product that can be advertised as safe and effective without giving a fair balance on the risks and benefits. That's an obvious one. The way this pandemic should have been handled is with the 4 pillars of pandemic response. This is what I taught America in the fall of 2020. This is the basis of the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons Home Treatment Guide. We should have had a team of doctors working on trying to reduce the spread of the illness. Turns out the most effective way to do that is with dilute iodine or peroxide-based nasal sprays. That's actually the most effective way to reduce the spread of the illness. Have a huge focus on early treatment, and we have to use drugs in combination, and they've changed over time, but they do work, not a single drug, but drugs in combination. Do the best we can on in-hospital care. Every hospital should have reported their statistics, their mortality statistics. We should have had best practices. Do you know in California, there still is not disclosure of the hospital mortality rates and who did better than others? Where were the advancements in the treatment protocol? In our audience today is Dr. Dawn Michael, who herself and her husband, who's a physician, they were on death's doorstep with the severe cases of COVID. Dawn survives, and she struggles to find her husband, and he's dying. He's not dying due to COVID because he got enough early treatment. He's actually dying because of remdesivir, acute kidney injury, on top of chronic, and sadly, her husband passed away. In California now, for hospital care, there is a class action lawsuit led by lead attorney Watkins, hundreds of families on all of these breaches of standard of care, personal injury, and basically fraud that was carried out by the hospital administrators. When there is a fatal illness, the doctors must use all resources at their disposal to take care of patients. Hospital administrators and pharmacies cannot block the doctor's attempt to save the patient. Early in 2020, the ICON study was performed and published in Chest, one of the best pulmonary journals, by Dr. J.J. Roster. And he used ivermectin and clearly showed oral ivermectin, in addition to other drugs, or even down the NG tube when someone's on the ventilator, reduced mortality. Every single American hospitalized should have received ivermectin, plus other drugs. 100% of them. 100%. It's safer than Tylenol. Now the FDA is being sued over this because the FDA put out false statements that it's only horse paste, and they had a campaign against ivermectin. In November of 2020, the World Health Organization said remdesivir under no circumstances should be used to treat COVID-19 because it doesn't improve mortality and it causes kidney damage and liver damage. The World Health Organization said that. They were backed up by an ethical review and the European Society of Critical Care. So when the World Health Organization said that, the California HHS should have called an emergency meeting and gotten all the remdesivir off the shelves of every California hospital. And when I testified in the Texas Senate, I said the same thing in the Texas Senate. I said that happened under your watch. You're falling asleep on the job. You're falling asleep on the job. And patients and families had to defend themselves against remdesivir. And patients and their families had to try to sneak in ivermectin. And these gross breaches in the standard of care, the public should be outraged, and they should make each and every doctor and hospital pay for this. Now, vaccinated or not, we need early treatment. The new risk paradigm, which I've recently published on our Substack, is really important. The most important feature for risk now is if you've already had COVID. When you've already had COVID, the chances of any serious outcomes with the second infection are negligible. How many people here have already had it? Just about everybody. You're good. A recent study by Chin and colleagues published in New England Journal of Medicine, October of 2022, show 59,000 prisoners, 17,000 staff, once you've already had COVID and you get a second case, zero risk of hospitalization and death. Zero. Didn't matter whether or not you took a vaccine. That's the most important feature. Having prior COVID, you're good. And Kemotelli and colleagues from Qatar have shown it's long-lasting. It's long-lasting. 15 months and going in terms of observation. Now, after that, there's risk factors, and we can anticipate risk, particularly with first infections. And there are treatment approaches. The treatment approaches that we devised and published were based on the fact that a small number of people would need treatment, precautionary principle. We looked for drugs with signals of benefit, acceptable safety, and we put them together in combination. The points of treatment where we were not going to wait for the government to hand us an outpatient treatment protocol, which still has not been devised. We're 3 years into this, and the idea that the government is going to hand you a sheet and tell you what to do has never happened. The group that had the first treatment protocol together was FLCC. Many of you know that name, Frontline Critical Care. But it was an inpatient treatment protocol. The AAPS had the first outpatient treatment protocol based on the groups that I put together, and that was in October of 2020. Now, I won't go through the phases of the illness, but it's recognizing that this is a complex, multiphasic illness allowed us to put the treatment protocol together. Do you know the NIH has never even conceptualized the illness properly? Anthony Fauci has never actually shown this slide, yet it's the fundamental understanding of what this illness is. These three phases of viral replication, inflammation, and then thrombosis, blood clotting, and thrombosis. The treatment protocols now are widely available, aapsonline.org, on my website, petermcculloughmd.com, but everyone should have their supplies ready, starting from up top, the virucidal nasal washes and gargles, the over-the-counter supplies, and should be ready for this. No one should be shopping in the middle of being sick. These subsequent infections will happen, and they'll be mild, and you'll get through it. The development of all this and all the tension that's happened over the last 2 years are part of this gripping narrative, Encouraged to Face COVID-19. So I hope you enjoy the book, that you recommend it to others. I went on Steve Bannon's show several times now, and Steve has said something that's really impressed me. He said, "Thank goodness you took the time to write the books and the efforts," which is onerous to do it. He says, because the electronics are going to be whitewashed. Twitter, Google, Facebook, all of this is all distorted. It's not true. It's contrived. It's censored. Everything's, even the Wayback Machine's been corrupted now. You can't go back. The bottom line is, what only thing that's going to be trustable is a book. You hang on to it. It's got citations. It's not going to change. It's not going to be falsely rewritten like a Wikipedia page. You can actually hang on to it. This is one of now maybe 10 books that everybody should have in their library because you want it. We have 300 citations, and when we say these things happen and we have the citation, you have it there as your evidence, if you will, in order to navigate forward, because you're going to talk to people about this and say, yeah, the illness has always been treatable. Well, here's the book that showed that, in fact, that's the case, and this is how it was done. So my final slide is this. This is the call to action. I am convinced the only way for us to get out of this is to drop all the vaccine mandates immediately, all of them. Prohibit all forms of pressure, coercion, and threat of reprisal for vaccination. Prohibit them. Do not allow them to happen. This database on whether or not you took this vaccine, forget it. Forget it. You know, it boils down to, are you going to comply with this or not if this goes through? Ban all forms of vaccine discrimination. These vaccines need to be pulled off the market or paused for a safety review. We need vaccine injury treatment centers. Our practices are overloaded with patients with blood clots and heart damage and neurologic damage, and they're paralyzed. I mean, this is a disaster. I had 2 young people come in my office. They're amputated here. Their legs are gone because of arterial blood clot syndromes. I mean, this is worse than a war. And so we need to demand research funding in research centers. Every single person here can help. Go visit your doctor and ask them, should I take any more shots? They go, oh, yeah, you should take more shots. So listen, I'm concerned that they're not safe, and I'm not taking any more. Every doctor needs to hear that feedback until they come out of their trance. And we do need this pivot to early treatment. And you can follow up with that. Doctor, if I do get COVID, are you familiarized yourself with these protocols? Are you ready to prescribe the drugs and guide me through this? If not, are you going to refer me to somebody? The patients have to bring 1 million doctors who have been in a trance out of it. We need them. We need them. And it's up to you. Only you can do this. Only you can do this. I walk into a major medical center every day, and my former friends look at the ground. They are ashamed to look at me. The shame and the guilt that you can see all over their faces, it's clear. It's clear. All of you are out here for a reason. You knew this wasn't making sense. You wanted reconciliation. You wanted corroboration. You wanted fellowship with like-minded people that said, listen, this doesn't make sense. You all have eyes to see and ears to hear. Many people outside this building, in this community, have scales over their eyes. They actually can't see this. And it's going to be our collective challenge to help them see what's happened. And there will be an awakening, and I think there's going to be a relative horror and panic that will set in this country and the world when they realize what they've taken into their bodies. And I'm going to finish with something that Joni Lamb told me. I've been on Daystar, which is bigger than Joe Rogan in terms of its audience worldwide. Daystar is the largest Christian broadcasting network. When I set all records on Joe Rogan, he goes, this is the biggest thing you've ever done. Turns out it was the biggest thing he ever did for his studio. But it wasn't the biggest thing I did, because I went on Daystar with initially Marcus and Joni Lamb, and each one of the shows, they run reruns, but they think about 600 million who watch each show worldwide. So that's 1.7 billion was the first view. And we've done it 4 times. Sadly, Marcus has passed away almost certainly from a heart attack during a acute COVID-19 illness. Sadly, he did. But what Joni said is, for all the people who have taken the vaccine and they're coming out of this and they're coming to this this understanding of what's happened, the vaccines look like they don't leave the body, the spike protein is permanent, the genetic material is permanent. What Joni said is, God is bigger than a vaccine. And I think you have to take that and have the hope and have the faith and have the courage to hold strong and to follow your instincts and follow your judgment, because that's what's carried you to where you are now, and it's going to carry you successfully into the future. Thank you so much for having us.
Do a little Q&A, that's for you. Thank you so much for being here. And let's ask some of those inquiring minds want to know, Dr. McCullough. And you used a figure that I have not heard yet, because all of us have loved ones that have had the vaccine, and we're concerned for them. And we're praying for them in faith that God is bigger than that. but you shared about 15% of people are having a negative reaction. Now that's right now on VAERS, which I know is so underreported. They have 17,868 people have died from that. And is it so, I mean, it's only 1% of people that actually, because it's voluntary. What do you estimate that as a rule, but how would that
There's a couple of good data sources. So I mentioned the Zogby survey. Zogby is a representative survey company, and they ask people, did you take the vaccine, and are you okay or not? It's a very good survey. It's published by the Children's Health Defense. 15% have some new medical problem that they reported. That's voluntary. Another source of data is the CDC V-Safe data. The V-Safe data show among those who take the vaccine, and this was 10 million people in this sample, 25% the next day and day after are incapacitated. That's how sick they are with the vaccine. And 7 to 8% of them acutely have to be hospitalized or go to the ER. That's in the CDC V-Safe data, 10 million people. So we have a final data point, and that's a Michigan State survey by Dittmore and colleagues. 22% of Americans know somebody who's either died or been injured by the COVID-19 vaccines. So if you put all those together, it's roughly 15% of people now are suffering with something from these vaccines.
And do you think that will increase? Because what we heard early on from some medical professionals is that because of the spike proteins, we might see in the next 3 to 5 years autoimmune issues. Can you address that? Those are not acute right now. They're not immediate.
What I'm seeing in my clinical practice, and I think it's cumulative, each one of these shots loads the body with spike protein, but there's a wild card. And the wild card is getting COVID. And getting COVID loads the body with more spike protein and triggers inflammatory responses. So what I'm seeing is what happened to Al Roker, the weatherman. Al Roker takes shot 1 and shot 2 and shot 3. You know, he gets COVID, and then Al Roker, a month or 2 later, blood clots and shoots to his lungs, and he's complicated. You know, that's a classic example. Bruce Arians, coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, shot 1, shot 2, shot 3, COVID in between. Now he's got myocarditis, and he's hospitalized. We can go for person after person. So the wild card is getting COVID-19. I think it's cumulative. But for each one of these syndromes, in general, there is this resolution. The neurologic syndromes in general resolve partially or sometimes completely, and it just takes time. But this intercurrent COVID infection worries me. I've had 2 patients in my practice, women in their 50s, 18 months after the last shot, blood clots. Yeah. So, you know, we're not out of the woods, and I'll just say one final word. I think the data are still in the early phases of evaluation, and I'm not ready to make this call conclusively. I pretty much stick to what the FDA agrees to. The FDA says the vaccines cause blood clots, they cause heart damage, and they cause neurologic damage and bone marrow blood disorders. The FDA agrees to those 4. What people are greatly concerned about is cancer. And could the spike protein or the genetic material or fragments of the genetic material actually be oncogenic and promote cancer? I think the jury is out right now. But in the next few months or years, if this is conclusively shown, I think you're going to see a panic in this country like you've never seen. Because many people think, listen, I got through it. I didn't have blood clot. I don't have heart damage. I'm fine. And if we now have data that, let's say, the 5-year actuarial rates of female reproductive and breast cancer, solid organ tumors is increased, I think you're going to see this sense of, oh my gosh, what did I do to my body? And I'm worried about that. I hope that doesn't come to become reality.
Let's talk about a little gender-specific things, how it does affect the reproductive organs, what we're seeing with miscarriages, what we're seeing with the difficulty of conception, and then for the young men, it seems to be more of a heart issue. Speak to the gender-specific nature for the young people.
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you know for COVID-19, the illness, men have a rougher time than women? And the Brazilians innovated with using anti-androgens temporarily, the FLCC group. That's an interesting observation. Men always do worse with COVID than women. Well, we now know with the vaccines, a large study published in British Medical Journal, that they prolong the cycles for periods. They prolong the cycle. That's unequivocal. There's a huge study that showed that the women's cycle between menses is increased a little bit.
Would that be a 15%, or is it?
It's by a couple days, but this is the important point. The female reproductive cycle is very, very immaculately conceived and orchestrated. Mm-hmm. And throw it off by a day. I've interviewed experts on this. 100% chance that's going to drop population fertility. That alone is just changing the menses a little bit because it's a complex cycle. Now, the vaccines by a biodistribution study released by the Japanese do hyperconcentrate, the lipid nanoparticles hyperconcentrate in the ovaries. The spike protein causes damage. The chain of logic would suggest the spike protein is damaging the eggs. Now, women only have a certain number of eggs, so if the cycle is thrown off, which it is, and if eggs are damaged, which they probably are, now we're really talking about a substantial individual reduction in fertility. And that's the reason why the vaccine manufacturers never allowed women of childbearing potential who could not guarantee contraception to even be in the trials. They never should have taken a vaccine. A young woman should have never taken a vaccine, ever. Now, on the male side, 2 studies, one from China and then one from Israel, showed drops after vaccination of sperm quantity and motility. Those are the 2 measures. Right. Both went down. Chinese study, 15% reduction. The Israeli study, a 30% reduction. Wow. Well, if men are in a range of fertility, so a man at the lower end of the range of being fertile is going to be rendered infertile by those changes. A certain percentage will, and then it rebounds after 6 months. Men make endless amounts of sperm, and you know, I think everybody knows that. So I know that it's like an embarrassing thing. So the net analysis on fertility is exactly what's being seen across Europe. If you go on any Substack out there right now, they are showing calamitous drops in population fertility. Calamitous. You know, things that we haven't seen now in decades, and the explanation is COVID-19 vaccination. Now, finally, the last difference is on heart damage, and there's no doubt about it. I've published on this with Jessica Rose 2 papers. 90% of the heart damage victims are men. And we know from 2 studies, one by Mansugian, the other one by Lepesic, the rate of heart damage of people taking vaccines is about 2.5%. That is huge. We're talking heart damage. Heart damage where there's an elevation in cardiac troponin similar to a heart attack, and then about 50% of this, there's symptoms and EKG changes and more dramatic things like hospitalization and arrhythmias, but the other 50%, it's silent. And the chain of logic here is this heart damage is silent, it forms a scar, and then that is the setup for a sudden arrhythmic death. These deaths that you saw in the video, that under the right conditions of adrenaline and how the heart depolarizes, and the 2 periods are 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. during sleep and on the athletic playing field. That's where there's a surge in adrenaline. That's where we're seeing this unprecedented numbers of cardiac death. And so one of the videos to go out there and watch is the Vaccine Safety Research Foundation. It's called Until Proven Otherwise, and I did it with Asim Malhotra in the UK, 2 cardiologists. And what we're saying now, if the next person who dies of a cardiac arrest, and there's no antecedent illness, and there's no suicide, drug overdose, or motor vehicle accidents, they just die, that is due to the vaccine until proven otherwise. Now, if the family comes out and said they didn't take the vaccine, we'll lay off. But the families are regretful, they feel guilty, and they are silent on the vaccine, and that is prima facie evidence that, in fact, they took the vaccine.
Mm-hmm. Lastly on this subject, and then I have a question for John, and that is the clotting, is it gender specific at all? Or is it equal, you know, in its
The clotting, in my experience, and there's a few papers to support this, is largely based on the genetic predisposition of clotting. Those who are more likely to clot when they take the vaccine, they're the ones who are getting in trouble with blood clots. And blood clots occur during COVID-19, they occur with the vaccine, and they occur on both. And they're on the arterial and venous side. And I can tell you, as a cardiologist in the last 3 years, I have seen, I think, every blood clot syndrome you could imagine. Yeah. This week alone, I was called with one of my patients with a 14-inch blood clot in the leg. 14 inches. Normally, they're less than an inch, just a few centimeters. 14 inches. He had COVID 2 times, no vaccine. No vaccine. So I am telling you, with an underlying blood clotting disorder like factor V Leiden, protein C or S deficiency, prothrombin 2021A variant, MTHFR, all of these lead people to be more likely to form blood clots. What people are seeing is what the embalmers are reporting, these large rubbery blood clots. Those almost certainly form post-mortem. Nowadays, when people die, and any one of you have had lost loved ones in the last year, as I have, know this, the bodies are taken to the funeral homes and they are put in the cooler for a long period of time before something happens. Days. And I can tell you, those are almost certainly forming post-mortem, these long clots. The embalmers, normally blood should liquefy during death and should be easily drained out, but instead they are forming these rubbery clots. That's because the spike protein is in the clots, probably from both COVID and from the vaccine.
Wow. So if you were to say, if somebody was concerned with the population of the earth, this is the best sterilization in human history. I mean, literally. I mean, if the percentage of the fertility for the woman and for the man.
Whether it's by intention or it's just a disaster of the SARS-CoV-2 viral epidemic and now the vaccine debacle, we can say there's been a mass loss of senior citizens and frail individuals in our society, and there is unequivocally now a reduction in fertility and also a skyrocketing rate of fetal loss with pregnancies that are conceived. And those data are coming out. Dr. James Thorpe, who testified in the Senate now, has papers published and under review close to a multi-fold increase rate of early loss, which is called miscarriage, and then later loss after 20 weeks, which is called stillbirth, and then hemorrhagic complications and clotting complications at birth.
Wow, unbelievable. So we mentioned that 15% of people have a negative response to the vaccine. So is for the women and the men that have fertility issues, is that basically also just 15% of the ladies might have this problem and 15% of the men? Because you're saying it's higher than that?
Fertility is different. I gave you the stats on the men, so it's 30%. Men in general have a 30% reduction. That means almost every man takes a reduction in sperm count and motility. Wow. And with women, in the British Medical Journal paper, virtually every woman has a slight change in her cycle. So I would conclude that virtually every couple now will have some difficulty in conception. It's all going to be relative. Some won't be able to conceive at all.
Right, if they've been vaccinated, obviously. For you, John, philosophically, historically, looking at some of these things, because what's came to light with this, these things going on is we also see the coordination of the preparation for a future pandemic that unfolded in that way, and the global response, because the global leaders, the state leaders and the business leaders, like you said, there's this marriage in this medical complex of business and state leaders going to Davos, they're going to the World Economic Forum. Klaus Schwab wants to move things into socialism. It's the Great Reset. He's writing books. There's a problem with world population. It just came out this week that President Biden had met secretly with George Soros, Hillary Clinton, various people, George Soros, obviously a big mover and shaker in this desire to really deconstruct society. I mean, he's nefarious in putting these DAs, he supports them, they go in and then they just let lawlessness go crazy. And we're seeing this in the major cities where he's behind. How do some of these pieces come together? We're seeing this, John. We're trying to get the medical facts, but there's also a nefarious, I mean, it is a spiritual evil. Just for people, to let people die, Dr. McCullough, for their experiment or what they're doing, literally keeping ivermectin and hydroxy and the treatable repurposed drugs, it is evil.
There are two elements to this. First of all, I think it's useful to go back to our founding father, James Madison, who's a great student of history. And he pointed out that most of human history is the history of tyranny. There is just something in the human heart that leads to these situations of extremely ambitious men who desire to exert and extend their power over everyone. And I'm glad that we're in a Christian church. I really like the history of Rome in the early Christian period. There was a wonderful novel by a Polish novelist named Heinrich Sienkiewicz called Quo Vadis. And there's an apocryphal story. St. Peter was in Rome. He was going to establish his congregation in Rome. And it got so hot and so frightening, this was during the reign of Nero, that he tried to leave. He fled on the Appian Way, fleeing from his congregation. And there on the Appian Way, he encountered an apparition of Christ. And in the translation, he says, Quo vadis, which means, where are you going? Like, you're not supposed to be running from this. Like, go back.
I have a new phrase. What is it? Quo vada?
Quo vadis. Where are you going?
So everybody wants to leave California. That's the phrase.
So
where are you going?
That was it. I kept, when Amy was saying, don't leave. Like, stay and
you were hearing that phrase in your head.
I was thinking, like, the people getting in their U-Haul trailers and headed to Texas, Quo vadis, where you go back and try and recover some civilization. So there is this desire that we see throughout history. Peter Bregan calls it the empire-building impulse, where very ambitious, very energetic men wish to exert their dominion over all of us. Madison understood that, and he wanted to erect a constitution in which men and women would be governed, but there would be a framework that would protect the governed from the governors in the event that the governors became voracious and tyrannical. So that's what we're seeing, I think, with these globalists. It's a desire to eliminate the U.S. Constitution.
Yes.
It's a desire to extend a centralized dominion over all of mankind. And Madison's great polity is the biggest thing standing in the way. So that is a very well-defined secular ambition. There is another element to this, and Dr. McCullough and I speak about this at length. There does seem to be an element of malevolence as well. We document this in our book.
Yes.
And I'm a student of history, and I also like literature. There was a great play by a great German poet named Goethe called Faust. And Faust is this ambitious doctor. He wants to understand the world. The world is a complex place, and life is short. So he's frustrated. He feels like, I just can't ever really penetrate the mystery of life. And one day he meets a guy named Mephistopheles, who is an agent of the devil. And he says, I am the spirit that constantly negates. And you think, well, why? Why? He says, because everything that exists deserves to be destroyed. And Faust is very intrigued by this. Why is this your attitude, your posture towards the world? There does seem to be an element of just malevolence.
Yeah. Let me give you an example of malevolence that's not in the clinical world. You can think of examples in the hospital where people did bad things to each other, or with masking or social distancing. But I think this one really is emblematic. When you see a massive amount of effort put forward in order to hurt somebody. Here's the example. Somewhere in Chicago, there's a graduate student, and his university said, you have to take a vaccine. And he's pretty far along in his PhD program. He says, I can't take the vaccine. I'm not going to take it. And they said, you have to. He said, I'm not going to. He says, I'm simply going to transfer, and I'll finish my PhD at another university. You know, I'm good. They met as a faculty. They met with the registrar. They went through all the university procedures to rewrite the university manual to not allow him to transfer his credits to the other university. So he would have to start from scratch. So he would lose years of his life. That's malevolence. It was in the minds of the faculty and of the registrar and of the deans of that university to hurt that young man. They wanted to hurt him in the context of a vaccine mandate. So this is very important. I have done a lot of things on Clubhouse, and whatever's going on is going on all over the world. It's going on in the tiniest islands in the Asia. It's going on in the deepest forests of Africa. It's going on in places where they don't know about Pfizer and Moderna. They don't even know who Fauci is. They don't know. I can tell you, it's in the minds of people to hurt other people right now, and it's worldwide. And probably in your lives, you can think of dozens of examples.
Unbelievable. I'm glad I'm a Christian because I have a tendency to backslide right in that story, just to want to get justice for that young man. It's so infuriating to see the heartbreak of somebody pour their whole life into something and with their agenda. I mean, it is sheer evil. We have some questions that came in, and so we'll try to hit these real quick. Is there a difference in the dangers of the spike protein for those of us who have had COVID or the spike proteins from the vaccine? Is there a difference in the physical?
I'd say COVID alone, the goal of treatment with the nasopharyngeal infection is early treatment, limit the invasive nature of it, get very little spike protein exposure. We know if people who are well treated for COVID-19, they have relatively little measurable antibodies. That's actually a good thing because that means they didn't get much systemic invasion. The vaccine installs a heavy amount of genetic code and a big load of spike protein, and the antibodies are through the roof. The antibodies are a false surrogate for immunologic protection. The protection is all in the nose based on different antibodies, IgA antibodies and cellular responses. So the illness itself gives much lower spike protein than the vaccine. The worst is to get both. Oh. And there are at least 3 studies showing that if you've already had COVID and you take the vaccine, watch out. That's where a lot of side effects happen.
Okay. Can anything be done for those who have had the vaccine besides praying and trusting that the Lord's bigger than the vaccine? Is there anything that we can do physically to mitigate the
effects?
There are
no randomized trials. There are no conclusive studies. We're desperately searching for ways to, quote, get it out of the body. The spike protein seems to be within cells. The genetic material has been found in lymph nodes for months. And this is a subject of research. Things have been suggested, everything from vitamins and supplements to more ivermectin to intermittent fasting. The only hopeful thing I've seen is a paper from Japan with a supplement called nattokinase, which is a natural form of a thrombolytic. It was an interesting preclinical study, but very good. It was the only agent that dissolved the spike protein but left the cells and the tissues intact. So, that is worthy of a clinical trial. People are immediately out trying to buy this, and I just think it's too early. Yeah. But we can't get it out of the body. And what we're telling people is, listen, please, 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 just don't take any more of it.
Right. So how serious is this exposure to shedding? Say I've been vaccinated twice, and it's usually the most intense, like if I had normal COVID, right, that it's contagious in the sense of shedding. Tell us about that. People are concerned about shedding.
Recent paper by Helene Benoun from INSERM in France, a leading research institute, probably the best paper out there on this, does put it together that the genetic material is probably transferring between people. For sure, in breast milk, that's been shown by Hannah and colleagues, almost certainly through secretions, oral and urogenital secretions. Vertig and colleagues has shown the genetic material is circulating for at least 15 days, and the curves weren't going down. The Stanford study found it in lymph nodes for 2 months. I don't know how to advise people on this. The vast majority of people took vaccines.
What is the number, doctor, in America?
The CDC says the number is, I think, 87% who took vaccines. That's what the CDC says. Now,
we have 340 million people.
Okay, but I have to tell you, it doesn't reconcile with the Zogby survey, which actually said 2/3 took the vaccine.
Okay.
And there may be a tendency for our agencies to kind of overstate, right, because of this. So, but to put it in perspective, there is a chance for shedding. My general advice now is probably 90 days of no close contact. People have worried about the blood supply. Again, the clinical need for a transfusion outweighs anything. If a transfusion is to save a life in a hemorrhaging individual, just take the blood transfusion. Blood is only screened, by the way, for 9 communicable things, and blood contains all kinds of things in it. You just got to take it if you need it. I think efforts on trying to segregate blood like this are just are honest. We have bigger fish to fry than that right now. And people just have to make prudent choices at this point in time. The most important message is people should just stop taking these. The current number now is the CDC says only 13% of people are within range of actually being fully vaccinated. The majority of people are not taking any more.
But our hearts are really troubled. I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, and they're wanting to put it on the immunization list. Talk about the travesty of doing this, putting this vaccine into these small children.
What we're seeing is an unprecedented breach of regulatory and safety standards. Emergency use authorization means there must be an emergency and lives have to be at stake, and there can be no other alternatives. And emergency use authorization has historically only been for the military, not for the general public. The most recent set of vaccines, the bivalent vaccines, underwent no human testing. The animal studies failed in stopping COVID in the animals. The United States government had pre-purchased these anyway. The most recent application of the bivalent boosters by Pfizer to the FDA, the review period was only 3 days. That's the only amount of time. The CDC has never taken an experimental emergency use authorized vaccine and made it part of the routine schedule. So what we're seeing now are a series of decisions which are completely off the rails. They are not even close to being within a reasonable, prudent set of actions.
And only Governor Ron DeSantis, you would think all these governors would be standing up and saying, not in the state of Florida. I mean, him and Surgeon General Joe Ladapo.
But doesn't that tell you something when the state of Florida says no vaccination for children? Doesn't that tell you something when the rabbinical court for the Orthodox Jews says no vaccination of children? The country of Denmark says that as well. And we can go on and on. When there is a giant schism in how people are thinking about something, that tells you that there's a flaw.
Does the genetic material in the mRNA get passed on to babies whose mothers have been vaccinated?
Yeah, the expert opinion now is yes, almost certainly the babies of vaccinated mothers are taking in the genetic material. The spike protein is getting at least to the placenta and almost certainly damaging the placenta.
You just addressed this one. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit, John, as we wrap it up. Thank you for, first of all, aren't you so thankful for all this medical? But in philosophy, in history, we have this David and Goliath situation, this trillions of dollars, this complex, overarching with government leaders, business leaders, the Bill Gates, the Zuckerbergs, all these people on the censorship wagon, all this. How do American citizens, John, we've seen an explosion of citizen journalism. And that's the thing that we're just like, everybody has a voice, right? Whether it's podcasts. And the only way we're seeking to do what we can, John. Any tips for us? I mean,
well, I think that we're doing it. I mean, I was so gratified to discover Perk. And your story. I mean, I don't want to flatter you, but I mean, it was pretty brave. So I actually think that there's probably about 30% of humanity at any given time that thinks, no, wait a minute, this is crazy. But they need to be heartened. They need to be encouraged. I think that it's within our power to reach at least a third, and maybe we can expand the margins out to something like half of the American citizenry just needs examples, just needs encouragement. So it's a matter of Pastor Rick saying, no, not in my church, or the ladies at Perk saying, not our children. And I think if we see enough free associations and free-thinking writers and doctors standing up and providing an encouraging example, I think we can start to claw back against this tyranny. But the one thing that I think all of our people, and we need to educate our children about this, again, James Madison understood this. The dictator's favorite trick is always to invoke an emergency. We should always be suspicious of governors, mayors, presidents, whoever the public official is, invoking an emergency. And I think we should always go back to our Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. He was talking about, is it ever permissible to infringe freedom of speech? And he offered a standard that I think it was a controversial decision that he made. That's another story. But the standard was clear and present danger. It can't just be because some egghead has done a computer model and said, 6 weeks from now, unless you do exactly what we tell you to do, you're all going to die. No, that's not a clear and present danger. That's a hypothetical model. So we as a citizenry, we need to, and you know, as Orwell put it in 1984, what these tyrannical structures do is they want you to doubt your own eyes and your own ears. You know, we need to always learn to say, no, wait a minute. You know, I'm not seeing this. You're insisting that we're in the midst of an emergency. I mean, we laughed about monkeypox. It's like, what? It's an emergency? I mean, HHS, the HHS, Biden HHS secretary, declared a monkeypox emergency, and this again opens the floodgates of this pandemic response. We must be very, very vigilant against this, and we must teach our children, beware of politicians invoking emergencies.
As a student of history, have you been shocked by... I'm on. I'm on. Okay. 1984, 1984, written in 1949. How prophetic it is for this period of time is startling.
I think that what Orwell saw, and you started with talking about the French Revolution. There was a great British writer and member of Parliament named Edmund Burke. And in early 1790, January of 1790, I mean, this revolution had just gotten going the summer before. He wrote a book called Reflections on the Revolution in France. This was at the very beginning. He predicted every single thing that came to pass. Like, people thought, well, no, wait a minute. Like, did he have a crystal ball? Yeah. He even went as far as predicting the whole mess, the whole bloody mess will come to an end when a young and ambitious military commander just puts an end to the whole thing. Did he know about Napoleon Bonaparte? I mean, it's a remarkable book. So the question is, what did Burke see? What he saw was the spirit of it. It's not all of the factual details and debating about the data. He saw moving in the minds of these men like Robespierre, these are extremely dangerous, fanatical people. And if you give them an inch, they will be your masters. Mm-hmm. And Orwell saw the same thing. Mm-hmm. He served in the Spanish the Spanish Civil War. He saw how the communists had expropriated the Republican side of this thing, and he learned to recognize the fanatical spirit of tyranny that was manifested in these people. So when we saw all of this unfolding in early 2020, we didn't have all of the data. Dr. McCullough didn't have all the data as a medical scientist. I didn't have all the data as an investigator, but we recognize this just isn't right.
Can anyone think of these expressions of fanatical tyranny, of hegemony? How about this one? When you question me, you question science. How about this one? Someone working himself up into a frenzy. I'm not going to have unvaccinated Canadians sitting next to vaccinated Canadians on an airplane. Did you see him do that? Justin Trudeau? These are examples of fanatical tyranny. I think probably many of you can find examples in Gavin Newsom.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Did you think it interesting that I did in studying history that Robespierre was the public safety officer?
Yeah, the committee for public safety. Well, it's the same, is it not? So it's we have an emergency. Dangers are afoot in our country. Grant me special emergency power, and in return, I will keep you safe. Boy, when you hear someone talking that kind of language, even metaphorically, you better watch out.
So it's really important for everyone to push to close the emergency. Now, I have put it in the U.S. Senate record, multiple state Senate records. You know, I'm a doctor. I am qualified to understand when a medical emergency exists for the country. The medical emergency in the United States ended in January of 2021 when we had enough hospital capacity to handle these cases, and then from there on, we had it. There was no more medical emergency. There was going to be more cases, but the emergency state should have been closed in January of 2021. There never was a criteria met for a monkeypox emergency. That one should be closed. 1976, the United States had a National Emergencies Act put forward primarily to close emergencies. The most common emergencies that are still open are sanctions put against countries, based on economic sanctions, etc. But we need to push to close these emergencies. When we close emergencies, that means emergency use authorizations go away. That means all these restrictions go away. There's no more basis for the abuse of power. We have to push hard on this. No one's talking about closing these emergencies, and we've got to do it.
Yeah, Gavin Newsom will not give up his emergency power. As we end, you've stood, you've lost colleagues, you've lost friends. In some regards, you may have lost business. You gained a business in the sense that people knew where they come to trust their doctors. Most of us have lost trust in the medical profession. Can you give us a heartfelt exhortation as we leave, Dr. McCullough? What went through your mind? Is there a point where you said, this could cost me everything. This could cost me my career. This could cost me my board certifications. Tell us, did you have that journey? Did you have that moment and you just resolved? Because all of us, in small ways or bigger ways, also have to come to this point.
For me, it's basically been my entire career. So I've been stripped of 2 professorships, 2 editorships. I've been stripped of every NIH committee. I'm the most published person in my field in the world in history. I've been stripped of every pharmaceutical consulting position, all by certified letter or by email with no explanation, no due process, no faculty senate, no discussion. I've been fired from 2 jobs now as a doctor for, quote, no reason. No reason. Even though the contract says there has to be a reason. There's no reason. Okay. I'm now being stripped of my residency and my fellowship, my board certifications, because of an allegation of COVID misinformation. Every word that I said tonight, I cited. I am precision. You see me on Fox News, you see me on ABC, all the stations. There is no COVID misinformation. I am citing the data, period. Period. So I'm being stripped of that. There's very little left at this point in time. My greatest concern is that there's already been a crosswalk established between COVID misinformation, which is a government propaganda term, and domestic terrorism. And domestic terrorism will mean that people start knocking at our doors, and there's consequences, fines, jail time, etc. We've already seen something dark happen. I don't know if any of you saw this, but about a month ago, PayPal, the money vendor, announced they changed their terms of service. That they sent this out. We're changing our terms of service, and that if anybody is convicted of COVID misinformation, they're going to deduct $1,200 from their account. Yeah, that came out about a month ago.
That's stealing.
Now, there was an immediate reaction, and people started pulling their money out of PayPal, and PayPal literally in a weekend lost $6 billion in valuation. And then PayPal reversed this and said, oh, we didn't meet it. Now, here's the point. PayPal, you don't post any social media on PayPal. PayPal's not a social media company. What were they going to do? Hire people to start indexing Facebook and Twitter and Getter? How were they going to assess COVID misinformation and come up with an adjudication process, whatever? How is PayPal going to do this? They weren't. My hypothesis is they were approached by a government agency, and the government agency said, we have a list. Hit the people on this list and let's make them pay $1,200 because we want to cause harm to them, because as a government agency, we think they are committing and they are spreading COVID misinformation. Watch out for anything that says COVID misinformation. That is a government operation against its own people.
So, if we don't push back, we realize there will be political prisoners in the future because it's connected to domestic terrorists. And that's why we have to speak up now. But all those things you said, there's nothing left to strip from you, Doctor. What's the word of encouragement, though? What gives Peter McCullough, the man, the backbone to stand for what's right?
I can tell you, I wouldn't have done it any bit different. that this has been the most rewarding years of my life. And we'll just stand. We're going to finish it out. Let me just say one final word. And it comes from one of your neighbors. It comes from one of your neighbors, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the son of our former Attorney General, Bobby Kennedy, while he served next to his brother, John F. Kennedy. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said that the Kennedy children were taught that the greatest honor they could ever have is to be alive during the time of a great controversy. And we would all agree that this is a time of great controversy. That's the reason why you're out tonight. And to be alive during this time of controversy and to play a role in the resolution of the crisis and the restoration of normality and the recovery and the contribution to bringing our civil society back to the place that we remember it as a country and as a nation where we can pursue life, liberty, and happiness. That's our charge. There is no better time to be alive. All of us have that charge to do what we can to close out this crisis.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, John, so much. Thank you, Dr. McCullough. This was a real privilege.